All right, we have set up our reference in Photoshop. And digital painting is the most processing heavy process that we've learned so far because it has to track every brushstroke you do. So quit any programs you don't need open. And then we're going to start by locking our references and locking our background. To lock the background, you need to double click it, rename it, and then lock it. So now I cannot paint on any layer, just like when we did digital coloring. So we create a new layer, and we're going to call this the sketch. Okay, there are two ways to sketch. One is, I'll call it the charcoal sketch, using a traditional analog of like a canvas that I've primed with gesso. It's a nice, clean, white, smooth canvas. And now I'm going to use vine charcoal, a soft charcoal, to do a linear sketch of my subject matter. And instead of having my subject matter sitting for me, where I can look at them, I can look at the reference here, and I've made my hero reference nice and big if I'm going for something really representational. But I do not start with detail. So what are we going to do? We're going to use the brush. And we're just going to stick with the brush. Just this regular brush tool. And we are not going to use any custom brushes to start with. We're going to end up making our own brush. But just for our sketch, I want you to learn what the default brushes are. So open up this folder, which is General Brushes. And we are going to just use the soft, round, pressure size brush. So what does that look like? It is a size, I'll make it black on white here, the defaults, that we set. I like the size about the same size as a pencil eraser, but it's pressure sensitive, so if I press lightly, it will fill up only a little bit. If I press heavy, it will fill up all of it, right? And it is soft edged. It is not noisy, but it's soft edged. So it's kind of like a very soft charcoal. It doesn't have any, it looks digital, it doesn't have any of like the natural breaks in its texture, but we'll get there. But we're just sketching for now. I'm also going to use it at a low opacity, at about 50%, 60%, something like that. And now with my tablet, I'm just going to rotoscope. I'm just going to block out, actually I want it even lighter than that. Block out these big shapes, just like we did when we were doing our creature design and figuring out the anatomy. You just want kind of the basic shapes. The basic shape of a skull, it's kind of nice to have a skull right there, is a cranium and a mandible, right? The eye sockets, just kind of mapping it out. The teeth, where the jaws come together. The ear fits between the eye line and the nose line. This isn't a portraiture class, but there are rules for representational portraiture that the Romans codified and we still use today. The nose will fit, the width of the nose will fit in between the eyes perfectly. If you do a dot in the middle of the head, that's dead center on the action line in the middle of the face right here. It's on the eye line. The eyes are 5 spaces across the front in a 3/4 view. That's shown by having one eye width in between the eyes. And then if you connect those lines through the nose, you get to the edges of the mouth. See that triangle? So there's all kinds of ways you can kind of check your proportions. Here we're just cheating and tracing them. This is called rotoscoping, when you draw over film. It's how lightsabers were made to glow in the original Star Wars movies. And notice I'm just using big shapes. I'm not getting into tiny detail. So I'm going to use basic shapes like triangles, squares, circles, ovals, wedges. It's important to see kind of how the shapes come together. The column of his neck going into the rectangles of his collar, the wedge of that collar, the shoulder shape. if I'm going for representational, all of this needs to match. And the reason I draw it lightly is you can always redraw it. You can always Command Z. All right. Now I can turn off that hero reference, and I have a nice sketch to start. Okay. So that's one way you can do it. So this is what's called rotoscoped. Some semesters I haven't allowed it, but it's good to know about it. I'm going to do another layer. I'm going to lock that one and turn it off. And now this is going to be a freehand linear sketch. This has some advantages. So I'm going to make my reference a little bit bigger. Just going to duplicate it. Whoops. And just make it bigger in the corner. Because now I'm just going to use that reference to paint. And what do? I use the same brush, the same size, and this time I start with the circle of the cranium. And I do the jaw shape, and you'll see my lines are a lot sketchier now. And I find that halfway, and I find where the lips are. And I find the distance between the eyes. And I'm going to have his eyes open. So it's more important I get the space around the eyes than the details of the eyes themselves. The ocular cavity in the skull, right? And then the height of the forehead as this crown section is on. And then the shape of that. Now, how is this different than rotoscoping? This is my own drawing, so it's going to bring in my own kind of tastes and proclivities, even if I'm trying to make it fairly representational. It will already be somewhat stylized, which I see as a good thing. Especially if you have a history of drawing and you like drawing, laying things out for yourself. All right, it's got the circles. It's got these little embellishments. And this will help get you used to the tablet. Those of you who have been resistant to using the tablet on past projects, this is why we tried to introduce it to you, because you just need it for digital painting. You need that pressure sensitivity. All right, now let's compare the two. So, this is my freehand drawing. This was the rotoscoped drawing. Does either one of them look more or less like Andy Warhol? Not yet, right? They're just slightly different proportions. One thing I can see that I've drawn differently is I really straightened his jaw here, so I can always round that out. But I think I'm going to start my base color using that. Now here's a third way you can do a sketch. And that is with a shape painting instead. But for the shape painting, well, no, I'll use the same standard brush. So this is going to be called a shape sketch. So with the shape sketch, I don't start with black. I'm going to go right to my reference, and I'm going to start with kind of a neutral skin tone. And then I'm going to make my brush bigger. More like the size of a pink separate eraser, right? And I'm still doing it at the low opacity, soft edged. And I'm just painting shapes, changing the color. Remember, even things that look white are a color. Just like with digital coloring, once I'm done with the base painting layers, I'm going to replace or add a background that is gray so I can see my highlights and shadows a little bit better. And I'm just holding down Option to steal colors right from my reference. Doesn't matter that it's locked. And if I really like a color I get, like the color of the lips, for instance, I can actually paint it off to the side. So I can steal it anytime. Again, I'm going to paint him with his eyes open, so I just need the space of his eyes more than anything else. And I don't do the glasses until the end, because they're an accessory. The more opaque you want the paint, this is kind of like spray paint right now, the more you layer it up. And you have to do a lot of digital paintings before you kind of know what your favorite approach is to building up form. But the whole point is to keep it really loose and gestural at the beginning. And to keep it soft. Because in soft edges, you can find the hard edges to refine. That's why traditionally painters use vine charcoal, the softest of all the charcoals, to draw on their canvas. You don't use ballpoint pen. You don't use something that's really particularly refined. Here's what often happens with shape paintings. You see how I'm running out of room for it, right? Because I'm just filling the available space. So what can I do? I can take that shape painting, and using my freehand painting, this is what's great about digital art, I can shrink it and warp it to fit it in with my freehand sketch. It's good to do all this kind of stuff closer to the beginning of the process than the end of the process. All right. So now that gives me room to continue my shape painting. Andy Warhol is one of my art heroes, just because he really, really changed what was considered as art in the 1950s and 60s. And more than any other artist, he kind of exerted his will on personal identity and how that should be part of artwork. So he didn't make any like other artists before him that were closeted in their orientation.